Hey, nonprofit visionaries, it's Shalita, the nonprofit Easter O'Neill. And today I wanted to talk to you about the difference between an organizational budget and your program budget. You definitely need to have more than one type of budget for different reasons. And so I'm going to walk you through that. I know some of you are probably like, oh my goodness, I can't even grasp the regular budget or what I'm supposed to do with a typical budget. Don't worry, it's not that complicated. I will walk you through it and explain, but you definitely want to have more than one type of budget. So first, when we talk about your organizational budget, that means your operational budget. I know you may have heard that term thrown around, but operational or administrative budget overall. So that includes the expenses that you have to pay, not only for your program or to make sure that you're directly implementing or delivering your services, your programs, but also everything, the admin of the operation that goes into that. For example, as the executive director, if you are not active, like let's say you've hired people to be a program manager, a program coordinator, they are actually delivering the services and you're overseeing them. So typically those in management positions aren't necessarily part of your program, or their salaries aren't necessarily part of your program budget unless part of their time goes to helping to implement those services. So if you're just starting up as the executive director or founder, you are probably also going to be doing a lot of programmatic work because you don't have a team yet. You're working to build your team. So in addition to including your salary and the overall operational or organizational budget, when you break it down by program, and I'll give you some examples of what that could look like. When you break it down by program, you're also going to include a portion of your salary for those programs that you are dedicating time towards. All right, so that's an example, as well as if you have an administrative assistant who is helping the management team or helping the executive director, and they're not necessarily participating in the programs or helping to be a team member with programs, then they would specifically be in the operational or organizational budget and wouldn't necessarily be included in your individual programs. But for the next reason that I'll explain to you, I like to also make sure that some of my management team are also included in the programmatic piece, because honestly, roles bleed over. People, your admin assistant, especially if you're just starting up, also are going to be helping with some of the programmatic pieces. So everybody has a part to play, but I just want to make sure you understand the difference between the two. Okay, so operational or organizational budget versus your programmatic budget. And typically, when we get into funders and what they want to see and what they think is responsible breakdown of how much time or money you're supposed to be putting into your programmatic services or your programmatic activities versus your operational activities or your admin, your management. Funders really want to see, I don't want to say a percentage because that's trivial and some people will agree and some people will disagree. But what I've seen in the past, which I think is unreasonable, where they'll want you to keep 10% or no more than 10% of your overall budget should go to management or operational costs or non-related programmatic costs. So when they ask with the breakdown between your operational or your admin or your administrative budget and expenses versus your programmatic expenses, they expect to see that admin very small. And like I said, I've seen and also heard people say, well, 10%, if you're more than 10% or 20 or 30%, all in all, the purpose or the goal is to make sure that your programmatic expenses, which you're spending your money on, the majority of your revenue that's coming in should be going to your programs. People don't want to see admin heavy expenses, and then you have this little teeny budget that you're actually doing something with the community or what you said you're going to do with. Nobody wants to see that. So instead of giving you a percentage breakdown of what's acceptable, I will tell you to make sure that the majority of the money you spend in your budget goes directly to your programs to avoid any issues or optics around, how your money is being spent. And of course, we have to educate the nonprofit funder, especially, traditional sense around what it really looks like for nonprofits to be able to deliver their services, because honestly, if you don't have the admin or the management, the people to do the work or to organize and structure the work, then you don't have a program. So we've got some work to do with trying to shift that whole, that paradigm shift and that whole attitude towards how nonprofits should be spending their money. But this is where we are right now. And until we get there, this is good for you to know. So examples of organizational versus your programmatic budget. So let's say you have 3 programs. And I typically tell my nonprofit clients, especially when they're first getting started, you don't want to have more than 3 or 4 programs because you're being stretched in so many different directions. But let's say you have 3 programs. And the first one is housing. You have a housing program, you have a mentoring program, and you have a career development program. Each of those programs should have their own budget. And I'll tell you why that's important. Because when you're going after funding dollars, whether it's a traditional foundation, whether it's a private foundation, family foundation, whether it's donors, individual people, whatever the case may be, people like to fund different things. And especially if you're talking about a traditional funder where they have their areas of focus and they may only focus on housing and maybe the environment, right? So you want to make sure that you're giving them information or that you're applying for funding that's relevant or that aligns to their funding goals. So that's why you need to also break your programming down by those different budgets so that when you're applying to different places, you'll know, okay, what they're interested in. You give them the information, you apply for funding for the program that fits and aligns in their focus. You're not going to just give them your organizational budget and have them sift through, well, what's your programmatic budget? What are you asking me for? What do you want me to fund? So you need to make sure that with the programs, that you have the breakdown of what it costs you to run that program. Now, the programmatic budget is a subset of your organizational budget. So your organizational budget should include all of the program, what it costs to run your programs. And with my clients, I break down the organizational budget with their programmatic budget, and we sit and we pull the different pieces from the organizational budget into their programmatic budget so they can see, okay, well, my overall organizational budget is $250,000. But to run my housing program, I need $50,000, right? And which is extremely helpful, because then when you apply for funding that is specific to housing, you can say, my programmatic budget is this much. You'll know how much you're trying to raise and how much you need to raise in order to actually implement the program, and be honest here on what it requires and what you're going to need in order to run that programming. So that's how we would break it down from the overall organizational budget. Now, like I said earlier, if as the executive director, you are also making sure that maybe you're doing intakes or initial assessments, or you're dedicating your time to that specific program, right? And your overall salary is maybe, let's say, $60,000. Okay, you have a $60,000 salary, and you dedicate 20% of your time to that housing program. Okay, well then 20% of your time, which is $12,000, should be in that budget. $12,000 of the executive director's time should be in your housing budget, because you are then putting that time into the program to help it run. I hope that makes sense. And you would do the same thing with your admin person. So let's say your admin person, you're giving them $30,000 a year, which is a yearly thing. You're giving them $30,000 a year, but they're giving 10% of their time to the housing program. Well, then you make sure that in your housing budget, you've got a line item for the admin person at $3,000, because that's 10% of their overall salary with the organization. And by the time you're done with your housing budget, all of that is accounted for. The management time, say you have a housing coordinator, they would appear only for housing, only in that housing budget, because that housing coordinator is not doing anything with career development, or is not doing anything with the mentoring program or any other programs that you have. And if they are, just the same way as you took a percentage of the executive director and the admin person's time, you would do the same thing to put across programs. pretty much you want to account for people's time and how much you're paying them, how much you're going to need to pay them to participate or to be a part of these programs and your programmatic budget. So I hope that wasn't too complicated. If you need additional support or if you want help building out a budget or creating these types of budgets, reach out to me, ShalitaO'Neal.com, so we can do some one-on-one coaching. It's part of the nonprofit strategic planning promotion that I have going on right now. We would develop the budget, but then not just developing your budget, but also, how are you going to raise the funds? And how are you going to tap into your board members' networks and engage your board members around helping you to raise your organizational budget as well as your programmatic budget. So recapping, there's more than one type of budget that you need to have. There's your organizational or operational budget, which encompasses everything that it takes that you have to pay in order to run your organization, in order to run your programming. All of it is in one. Then we have your programmatic budgets, which is specific to your programs. If you have a housing program, you have a budget for that. You have a mentoring program, you have a budget for that. You have a career development program, you have a budget for that. It's a subset of your overall organizational goals or organizational budget. The purpose that you do that, or you have it structured that way, is when you go after funding through traditional foundations or whatever the case may be, you will know or be able to tell them based off of your program or know if it aligns with what they're funding. They don't want to have if they only fund housing, they don't want your career development budget. They don't want your mentoring budget because that's not what they fund. They want the budget for the program that they fund. So that's why you need to make sure you have it broken down that way. Also, you need to also make sure that you're clear on how do I break down, my executive director or those who are considered to be management or operations, if they are putting time into my programs, then they also need to be counted in my programmatic budget. Now, I will tell you this, when you are applying for funding and you do your grant proposals, many of them, if not all of them, they still want to know what your organizational budget is. They want to know overall how much you're trying to raise, but then they will also ask you, what is your project budget or what is your program budget? And you need to be able to speak very specifically to that. Okay? So if you need templates, become a #nonprofit no filter member at ShalitaO'Neal.com. I have templates for everything. I have budget templates. I have bylaw templates, whatever the case may be. Become a member so that you can get access to that. And if you want some one-on-one support on building that out for you, in addition to strategizing around your nonprofit vision, make sure you schedule one-on-one time so that we can do that. I would love to be your coach. Again, ShalitaO'Neal.com. This is Shalita, the nonprofit Easter O'Neal. Until next time, get those budgets right. Get those budgets right when we're talking about the money. And be blessed.